Donovan Woods, welcome to eTown. Your songs are so beautiful, and
thank you.
I'm hoping that your love life is not as desperate as your songs suggest.
I mean, it is. It was. I wish I could tell you differently.
Well, that's why the emotional depth comes through, perhaps. But man, oh man, those are great songs. So thank you for sharing them. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I noticed that I don't know whether it's ever since Neil Young, but there is a high percentage of Canadian singer-songwriters who sing in higher registers. So you among them.
Yeah, I wonder what that is. Geddy Lee, right?
Geddy Lee. Well, what about
you see Geddy Lee around Toronto sometimes? I'll tell you, and it's weird to see him every time.
Yeah. What about Dallas Green sings really high.
Yeah,
Bahamas sings pretty high. Yeah.
Yeah. Afy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wonder what that is.
Is it it's because it's cold? Maybe.
I guess it's like a physiological response.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've never thought of it.
And
Neil kind of sings kind of high sometimes too.
Yeah, of course. That's the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to puzzle
never
you.
Considered it.
Yeah. Well.
I got to think about it.
Yeah. And I mentioned that you grew up at the lower shores of Lake Huron in Sarnia.
Yeah.
Right across on the Michigan border, right at the border.
Yeah. I could see I could see Michigan from my street.
What does it mean to live on a border town? You could probably cross back and forth pretty easily?
You could before 2001. You could, our hockey leagues you'd go to the border and they'd go, "Where you headed?" You'd go, "Shut up, get out of my life." And then you could just cruise over and get some gas for cheap. We used to go over wearing like shorts and a t-shirt and then buy a bunch of stuff cheap at their mall and then just wear all the clothes back, like wear layers of clothes back. You used to be able to do really cool stuff, but it's tighter now. It's just a lineup now.
Yeah. But
and for good reason. It's good.
Yeah. But I mean,
affordable.
But it wasn't romantic and mysterious because you could just go across the border anytime you wanted when you were a kid.
Yeah, it wasn't. It didn't have...
It was like, wow, over there is really cool.
I mean, it was because there was Ponderosa over there, and we didn't have any good mall stores. They had a Gap before we had a Gap and stuff.
And Sarnia is it was an oil town, right? It was like a chemical oil processing place.
Still is, yeah. Everybody's dad works in petrochemical plants, and if you don't, then you work for a company that works for a petrochemical plant, basically. Yeah.
So what were your jobs like when you were, a younger person before you dedicated your life to singing songs?
Well, when I was, my dad ran an asphalt plant, was the manager of an asphalt plant, so I worked at an asphalt plant testing asphalt cores. I know an unreasonable amount about asphalt, and can sometimes get in a really intense dialogue with someone who you don't know that there's an intense eternal battle going on between concrete and asphalt in terms of road construction, and perhaps you know that, but it's and they both have their benefits, but I figured that's the job that I figured I would have. And by all rights I should probably have that job. To be perfectly honest with you, look at me. I look like a guy that would be in an asphalt plant, so you know what I mean?
I want to know the top line fundamental conflict between concrete and asphalt.
You want to get into it?
Just the top line, just like
okay.
Yeah.
Concrete much more expensive.
Yeah.
Lasts longer. Asphalt much cheaper. Lasts a shorter amount of time. But concrete takes a really long time to set. It's got to set for a couple of days. Asphalt, you could have it ripped up and repaved in that afternoon. You know what I mean? So if we're talking about a road that has water mains underneath it, the conversation's over. It's got to be asphalt.
Asphalt, because you got to dig it up. Yeah.
In terms of highways, people like highways, but I don't like, driving on those concrete roads and you get that.
Doesn't happen with asphalt.
It's just me. Yeah. I don't like that. I'm an asphalt guy.
And so in Canada, there's some cool things that happen around the Canadian rules around what gets played on the radio and what percentage of music has to be actual Canadian music.
Yeah.
Which means that the government supports Canadian artists, both physically and commercially. So did that happen for you? Did you get a little boost from when you were starting out from the fact that you were a Canadian artist?
Yes, I did. My folk music, not a big radio, it doesn't really crush on the radio. So, I was played on the government radio stations early on. The thing that really helped me, CBC, yeah. And there's a thing called the Star Maker program where all the radio stations have to play 30% Canadian content, and if they don't make it, which they never do because there's not enough good songs, they have to pay a penalty, and all the penalties that they pay go into this fund that pays young musicians to tour places that aren't Canada.
Wow.
So for my whole first, I'm too old for it now, but my first tours of the U.S., I got $1,000 a show from the Star Maker program to make sure the show was viable. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it really was incredible. Yeah.
And then did you have an appreciation for Canadian singer-songwriters? Like, were you more of a Leonard Cohen person or a Gordon Lightfoot person, or were you just looking at American music all the time?
I was listening to
Rush and
I wasn't listening to Rush. I grew up, I was an adolescent in the late 90s, so I listened to hip hop mostly. Honestly, like my dad loved folk music. I was named after Donovan Leitch, the folk singer, and I listened to that when I was a kid. I listened to a lot of Paul Simon when I was a kid. We listened to Neil Young a lot. Yeah. I didn't get into Gordon Lightfoot until I was older and I could appreciate him. But honestly, at that age, I didn't know who was Canadian and who wasn't. I had no idea that Joni Mitchell was Canadian until I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
She just seemed too good to be Canadian, to be perfectly frank.
Canada's pretty big, though.
It's big. There's not very many people.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. And is touring in Canada different from touring in the States? It's a big, huge country, but people probably come out to shows and stuff, or I don't know.
Yeah, they do.
It's sort of the same.
Sometimes you get like an 8-hour drive, a 9-hour drive, and then a show that night, which is something that doesn't really happen. We're always so amazed when we're like everyone's. Basically, from here to Salt Lake is the deal.
Yeah.
But every drive in Canada is like from here to Salt Lake.
Yeah.
In America, we're just amazed. Every time you stop, there's another big city. I really am still amazed by it. That every time I was just on a tour opening for Drew Holcomb, and every time I woke up on the bus, we were in another big city, and it's another city with its own personality. I think of how fun it would be to be a young person in America to be able to pick a city that suits your personality. There's a city for everybody.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
That's
in Canada, there's 2 cities. You got 2 cool ones.
Yeah. Which one do you live in?
Toronto.
Toronto, yeah.
Don't make me say what the other one is.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'll get kicked out.
Yeah, right. Well, we're all trying to move there, so it's going to work out fine. We're going to work.
We'll see. We'll see.
I know you did you got back from a tour in Australia, and that's another place with more space and not a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some really long drives there.
Yeah. We flew between all the shows, every single one. Yeah, it was wild.
And that was your first time there?
Yeah, I'd never been before. Yeah. The plane ride was not. We had my content guy, photographer guy, collapsed on the plane on the way there.
Oh, too bad.
Because the plane was too. So it was not a great start. But that flight is. I don't know if you've ever done that flight.
Yeah, I've done that flight.
Oh God.
Yeah.
It's a punishment.
Yeah.
That flight.
Yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah. Did you stop in Auckland in New Zealand on the way for fuel or something like that?
No, we just all the way, right from Vancouver to Sydney. And then after we landed in Sydney, we flew to Perth. It was another 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, brutal.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah. But it's worth it because of your art.
Yeah. Sure. I think all the time, a joke once we make all the time when we're on like a really when we're on a flight that has a lot of turbulence, we'll say, well, at least we're dying for moderately popular folk music. It's worth it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to hear some more of that moderately popular folk music in just a minute. By the way, had you ever met Donovan Frankenreiter before today?
No, I've known about him my whole life because we have the same name.
Yeah.
And he does music, so I've known him my whole life, and I know his music, but I've never met him.
Yeah. What about Donovan Leitch? You ever met him?
I did one time.
Yeah.
And I told him I was named after him, and he did not care. I can't stress enough how much he didn't care. But I mean, I guess whatever. I guess it's all right. He seemed cool.
He's heard that before. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I would imagine so.
Yeah.
That's
Can you
right.
imagine?
Oh, I never even thought of that.
How many babies between 1968 and 1975 were named after
so
Donovan?
True. That's
oh my
so
God!
True. Oh yeah.
How many times has he heard that?
He was sitting on a pillow when I told him.
Yeah.
That's not a lie.
Yeah. That probably also happens a lot.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we are so glad you're here. Glad to get to know you a little bit, and we've got more songs. So let's get back to some music.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Donovan Woods.